Hey everybody, this is Craig of 9 Volt Games. If you know me, hello. If you don't, I run my own channel called 9 Volt Games. But today I'm doing a video for my friend Scott and his brother's channel, which is we're going to talk about horror movies. I believe that the increments we're going to do is a collaborative set of videos once a month to keep the channel fairly consistent. And Scott, who I know, and any of my viewers out there know is Stream Bloody. My cat is going to walk in front. Hey, what are you doing? I'm not editing any of this, so you're gonna have to just deal with this shit. Anyways, so Scott sent me a video, and we're doing horror comedies. And as soon as he did that, I instantly knew which ones I wanted to do. He talked about a few of them. I'm going to talk about two in particular, and they're tied together. So I own the digital copy of the first one, but I have a physical copy of the second, and that's Creepshow. Can you get out of here? What are you doing? Anyway, so Creepshow 1 and 2, it's hilarious that he's doing horror comedies because I consider these horror comedies because it was done by famous people. It was George Romero and Stephen King, and I know they continued it on as an actual show on Shudder, but I'm not discussing those ones because those lean more towards the horror and the gore, and these ones were like campy B-movie style, and they had a lot of famous names from back in the day in these ones. You had Ted Danson, Leslie Nielsen. I mean, like, they're comedic actors and they're playing in a horror movie and they're doing it's as camp as possible. So what I appreciated about these ones is it wasn't gore heavy. It wasn't even particularly scary. There was one in Creepshow 2, which is why it's my favorite, and I'll get into that in a little bit. My sons watched Creepshow with me, so I thought it was funny that we were doing this because I just recently watched both of them. And you can actually catch Creepshow 2 for free on Amazon Prime if you have Prime Video. So Creepshow 1 had a bunch of different types of stories, right? And the ones that stand out to me are the one that Stephen King acted in. And anybody who's seen any of the Stephen King movies back in the day, you know he had a part, and his acting is just fucking terrible. It's so bad back in the day because he was an alcoholic and he was coked up, and you could see it in his in the Creepshow 1 where I don't remember the name of the actual set of it, but it was the meteor came down and he touched it and he was having like dreams of grandeur, how he was going to be famous and he was going to get a whole $200 for the meteor that came down. And even in the episode, he was an alcoholic. He touched the meteor. It started to spread this fungal infection down his fingers. And one of my favorite parts of it, even when I was a kid and I watched it, is when he was looking and he was like looking at the things that he touched after he realized his growth was spreading. And he got up and he runs into the bathroom. He strips his clothes off and he's got it fucking everywhere he was touching. And he looks down at his crotch and the camera pans away. He's like, not there too. Fucking, I lost it. And as an adult, when that still happens, it's because of his lack of acting skills and the fact that they were going for camp, so it actually fit perfectly. I feel like his was the best because it was a one-man show. Aside from the daydreams with the doctor and the scientists who were all played by the same person, it was just over the top. And even now, it's still effective. And the thing that I liked about the Creepshow was they used practical effects. And I know with the one on Shudder, it's Greg Nicotero, and he's all about practical effects. That's how he made his name. But these ones had the distinctly 80s and early 90s practical effects when it came to gore and blood and guts and all that stuff. And yeah, so that one with the meteor is really what stuck out to me. The Where's My Cake, or it was called Father's Day, where the dad came back from the dead after being murdered because he didn't want brains. He didn't want to eat people. He wanted his cake, and and that was funny. That's my kids saw that one. That's the first one, and you know they'll tell you they're not scared, but they're scared of zombies. You know what I mean? It's a natural fear when you're a kid. You're afraid of scary things. But they watched this one and had no problem with it because I was like, he's not coming to eat people. He wants his cake. And anytime the zombie was moaning, I want my cake, my kids would fucking bust out laughing. So that's definitely why, like, I had the same reaction when I was a kid, and that's why I list these as horror comedies, because even if they tried to be scary, it was still like every one of these you're gonna laugh. And the fact that Leslie Nielsen, I know he started his career as a serious actor, and then with Airplane it went out the window, and this dude was like one of the best comedic performers in movies, and whenever you saw his face you were like, this is going to be funny, right? So even that, like trying to take him serious until the end of his, which was he caught his wife cheating, or he knew that his wife was cheating with their friend who was Ted Danson, and having those two on screen trying to have serious dialogue but still be camp. Anything they said, serious or not, was fucking funny to me. And when they came back, his look of horror when the water zombies came back to get him, it was played out so over the top, and it was Leslie Nielsen, and that's how I knew him. I didn't know him from anything serious, and I was like, they told all three of these actors and the actress to just fucking go overboard, and you can tell. Creepshow 2 only has 3. I believe Creepshow 1 had 5 tales or 5 stories. And they're all done in like a comic book format, because there was actually a comic book tie-in, or a novella, a graphic novel was made. And that was rare for the time that this came out. To have like a comic book tie-in, because comic book movies weren't a big thing, but to have a movie and a comic book come out together was something really special back in the day. So I mean, I had the it was more like a compendium of comics, and I had that when I was a kid. I wish I still had it now. I was just looking online to see what the prices were. But Creepshow 2 only had 3, and it was budgetary restrictions, which is kind of sad. But it's still, it's Stephen King, it's George Romero. So those 2 names should sell Creepshow 2 to you. This one leaned less towards the camp. Still had comedic actors, but it leaned less towards the camp and more towards the horror. And it kind of went that way with the 3. There was one that was just like so fucking out there. The first one was about the war chief. And I don't want to ruin the whole thing, because I want everybody to watch at least Creepshow 2 if you're going to watch any of them. It was a war chief, Native American statue that came back to life and was wreaking revenge for the people who killed the store owner. So, I mean, this is not really spoilers. Like, a lot of people are going to die. That's the whole premise of it. And that one was like over the top camp, but still it was funny, and it was still like effective horror, at least back in the day. The second one was The Raft. The Raft was so out there. It was about a big oil slick, or at least they thought it was an oil slick, and it was a couple kids. They're doing all the wrong things that you shouldn't do in the 80s and 90s that make sure you're going to die in a horror film. They're all scantily clad because they're wearing bathing suits. They're doing drugs. They're smoking pot beforehand. They're getting sexual. So you're like, everybody's going to die automatically. Like, it's done that way. And what I thought was funny about it is that it was funny, but the practical effects in The Raft were amazing. Still not the best in Creepshow 2, but they were amazing. That oil slick was a living thing, and it was eating the kids. Like, it would find a way to get the kids and eat them. And I think it was Tom Savini on this movie, and if it wasn't, like, you could fucking you'd be confused, because they were like top notch for the budgetary limitations of this movie, because this had no budget whatsoever. The first one, they definitely stretched their dollar, but this one, the 3 stories were longer, and they were super effective. But I don't want to say any more about The Raft if you haven't seen it, but it definitely shattered my expectations right at the very end, and I fucking loved it. And the third one is the one I will not let my kids watch, because I know that they will have nightmares, and it fucking gave me nightmares when I was a kid. They actually have t-shirts. If you look up Creepshow t-shirts, the third one of Creepshow 2 is the t-shirt you're going to find. And it's the Thanks for the Ride. And it's about a hitchhiker, and a lady hits this hitchhiker, with all the backstory around it. She hits this hitchhiker, and her guilt makes her keep seeing this guy, but accidents keep happening with this guy attached to the car, under the car, in the car, whatever, and his body just slowly degrades over time until he's just like a fucking fleshy skeleton, half flesh, half skeleton. His voice is really groany, and every time he says, "Hey lady, thanks for the ride. Thanks for the ride, lady," it freaked me the fuck out. It was probably the best zombie anything, and I think it was only like 10 minutes long. Super effective. It was awesome. You go back and watch it now. It's one of my favorite zombie style anything. It's one of my favorite horror anything, and it didn't have a lot of funny in it. I mean, you can watch it now as an adult, and every time you see like how ridiculous it gets over time and how his body starts breaking down, then it's funny. But for the time, like when I was a kid, I watched this when I was a little kid, and that shit gave me the worst nightmares, made me fucking terrified of hitchhikers. Like, it was insane. But yeah, check out Creepshow 1 and 2, and then go on to the Shudder series, because what's going to happen is the Shudder series is obviously higher quality, they got a lot more budget, and it's a show format, whereas these are movies. More like, you could think of these as like grindhouse style movies. It might not be as effective if you go backwards and watch, unless you're into super camp and then that's your thing. But I feel like if you're into super camp horror, you've already seen these. But if you haven't, do yourself a favor and watch Creepshow 1 and 2. They're not very long. You don't even have to sit down and watch the whole thing at once. You can watch it in segments because they're split up. Yeah. So those two are my favorite horror comedies. And the reason I always combine them into one is because if I'm watching one, I'm watching part two immediately after. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. I hope you like this series. Stay tuned. We got more coming.